We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, by air. President Roosevelt.
A date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Fear captured the nation following this surprise and crippling attack on the American naval fleet at Pearl Harbor. With the American and British declaring war against the Empire of Japan, and Germany and Italy following with their own declaration to America, everyday life in our nation changed. The American home front was fully mobilized as fear transformed into anger and vengeance.
Reluctant to enter the war when it erupted in 1939, the United States quickly committed itself to total war after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. The commitment included utilizing all of America's assets, including women. In addition to managing their households, in New Orleans, as the demand for public transportation grew, women even became streetcar conductors for the first time. When men left, women became proficient cooks and housekeepers, managed their finances, learned to fix cars, worked in defense plants, and Rosie the Riveter helped assure that the Allies would have the war materials they needed to defeat the Axis. Nearly 350,000 American women served in uniform, both at home and abroad, volunteering for the newly Women's Army, the Navy Women's Reserve, the Marine Corps Women's Reserve, the Coast Guard Women's Reserve, the Women's Air Force Surface Pilots, and the Army Nurses Corps. At the war's end, even though a majority of women surveyed reported wanting to keep their jobs, many were forced by men returning home and by the downturn in demand for war materials. Women veterans encountered roadblocks. When they tried to take advantage of benefits programs for veterans, the nation that needed their help in time of crisis, it seems, was not yet ready for the greater social equality that would slowly come to the decades to follow.
Labor underwent a very large amount of changes during World War II, including the integration of women into the workforce. When the men left to fight in the war, they left their jobs behind, and we needed people to come in and replace them. When Rosie the Riveter and her sisters began to work, most of them were mothers, used to domestic work and house care, and many had never worked for wages before. After the war was over, the returning soldiers wanted their jobs back, and many women left the workforce. However, about 1/3 of the women stayed and worked, which has led to them being integrated into modern-day jobs. Women were not the only ones who helped fill in the empty spots of jobs. In 1942, an agreement with Mexico brought thousands of agricultural workers, called braceros, across the border to help harvest fruits and grains. The bracero program outlived the war by about 20 years and became a fixed feature of the agricultural economy of many western states. Even though many people helped step in to take the jobs that American soldiers left behind, there were many jobs that the government canceled. The War Production Board halted the manufacturing of any non-essential items, such as passenger cars. It also assigned priorities for transportation and access to raw materials. Because of this, we were outproducing the pre-war supply. During the war, the membership of labor unions increased from about 10 million to 13 million workers, and while many of the major unions pledged to not perform any strikes, there were still many labor walkouts. To counter these strikes, Congress passed the Smith-Connolly Anti-Strike Act, which authorized the federal government to seize and operate any tied-up industry. Under this act, the government took control of the coal mines, where most of the strikes occurred, and also the railroads for a short time.
The war proved essential to the revitalization of the American economy after the Great Depression. Before the attack on Pearl Harbor, FDR had already begun to prepare for the worst. He increased defense spending and expanded the army and fleet. He also created a peacetime draft with increased military wages. After the attack, the Roosevelt administration spent over $35 billion in military industry expansion in California alone. They created new manufacturing plants, shipyards, aircraft factories, and military bases in cities such as Oakland, Richmond, Sausalito, Vallejo, and many more, including the expansion of already established bases in San Francisco and San Diego. This influenced another great migration to the Golden Coast, similar to that of the Gold Rush. Ration stamps were required to buy consumer products such as gasoline, rubber, coffee, butter, and oil. Many families gave up creature comforts altogether, voluntarily for the war. Due to rationing, schools created victory gardens to feed families and influence children to help. Bond drives also helped finance the wars as celebrities and war heroes challenged normal Americans to donate 10% of their paycheck and do their patriotic duty. Many Americans who contributed in this way became part of the 10% Club.
The 1940s were the heyday of the 17-piece big band, but swing, blues, and country were still popular styles. Benny Goodman, Glenn Miller, and Duke Ellington were some of the top musicians at the time. Their songs In the Mood, I'm Getting Sentimental Over You, and Take the A Train define the musical period. Before the war, songs about isolationism like Let Them Keep It Over There, and songs that expressed the desire for war like Arms for the Love of America were popular. The Last Time I Saw Paris, which evoked nostalgia for the peaceful pre-war Paris, was an extremely popular song after the fall of France in 1940.
The last time I saw Paris, her heart was warm and gay. I heard the laughter of her heart in every street cafe.
Music became even more patriotic and war-related as the U.S. became involved in World War II. Songs about military service, religion, military life were prominent themes, and many songs targeted people's emotions or feelings of hope, longing, love, and loneliness. Songs followed events with unusual immediacy throughout the war. Remember Pearl Harbor and We Did It Before, We Can Do It Again were recorded days after Pearl Harbor. God Bless America, originally written by Irving Berlin, was resurrected by Kate Smith and became an instant hit, embraced by the entire nation. Radio provided news and entertainment for Americans during the war, giving frontline reports and updates on the fighting overseas as the conflict progressed. Edward Murrow was a legendary journalist who provided some of these frontline reports. Dramatic radio programming also featured war-related storylines, such as Untitled by Norman Corwin, which traced the story of Hank Peters, a fictional character who was killed in combat. Throughout the war, there was a steady stream of war-related programming, such as a newsreel and animated cartoon with each movie-going experience. Some of these included Confessions of a Nazi Spy with Bugs Bunny and Daffy the Commando with Daffy Duck. Main features highlighted the trials of men in combat, portrayed enemies as terrorists, and praised the role of women as nurses and volunteers. They even explored the struggles of average families who suffered as loved ones were away at war.
In the village. I'll take them around. You are taking him where? Let me go. We have to search the house.
Let him go.
Come on. Leo, come on. Come on, Leo.
Wake Island, They Came to Blow Up America, Since You Went Away, and The Seventh Cross were just a few of the many war-related movies during World War II. In 1932, Kennesaw Mountain Landis, the National Commissioner of Baseball, asked President Roosevelt if professional baseball should shut down for the war. But the president responded by saying that it should continue since it was good for the country's morale and was a diversion from the war. This was known as the Green Light Letter. Most professional baseball players during the 1941 season were directly involved in the conflict, including future Hall of Fame Bob Feller, who enlisted one day after Pearl Harbor. Many who would never have had the chance to play baseball before were able to find spots on rosters.
The American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.